I had a feeling my wife was about to leave me, so I protected my assets first. She filed for divorce, then tried to undo everything. And before we continue, make sure you don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep the channel breathing. We'd been married 8 years when I realized something wasn't right. Nothing explosive. No dramatic confrontation. Just a slow shift in the atmosphere. Small things that most people might brush off. But I noticed them. The way she stopped texting me back during the day. The new passwords on accounts we used to share. Her habit of tilting her phone away when I walked into a room. Her smile, once warm and natural, became practiced, like something she wore instead of something she felt. I knew enough not to confront her immediately. I've always believed people reveal themselves more honestly when they think you aren't paying attention. So I watched. I listened. I paid closer attention to the rhythms of our life together. And what I saw was a woman slowly pulling away, not out of anger, but strategy. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was preparing to exit. Calmly, carefully, silently. At the time, I was doing well financially. I had built a modest but growing investment portfolio, owned a small property out of state I'd inherited from my uncle, and recently secured a major promotion at work. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable. We shared expenses, but the bulk of the financial responsibility had always landed on me. She worked part-time, claimed she wanted to focus on future plans, and for most of the marriage, I was okay with that. But once the shift started, I began reviewing everything differently. I started digging through documents. Not hers, mine. I looked at account access, ownership, beneficiaries. I realized how much was exposed, how many assets had her name on them purely out of convenience. Joint credit lines I'd opened in better times. Insurance policies I hadn't updated in years. Bank accounts where her name sat next to mine, even though I was the only one funding them. That's when I got quiet, too. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't snoop through her phone. I didn't bring up counseling or suggest we talk about us. I just started separating my financial life from hers, one thread at a time. I created a new bank account in my name only, moved over my direct deposit, transferred a chunk of savings to an account under a trust that only I controlled. I spoke to an attorney, not about divorce, but about asset protection. Not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I wanted to be ready if what I suspected turned out to be true. He walked me through a plan. Legal, quiet, strategic. I took notes, implemented slowly. I kept every move clean. I didn't lie. I didn't drain anything. I didn't violate any laws. I just began legally repositioning what was already mine, protecting the investments I'd earned before the marriage and creating clear separation between joint assets and personal holdings. Around the same time, she got more comfortable, too comfortable. She started talking about taking time apart, like it was a future phase we'd just naturally enter. She mentioned couples we knew who seemed happier after divorce. One day she brought up the idea of going on a solo vacation, something to clear her head. She said it casually like she was planning a weekend spa trip, but I heard what she wasn't saying. She was already gone. She just hadn't filed yet. So I got ready. Over the next few weeks, I updated my beneficiaries, removed her name from accounts that allowed it, closed the joint credit card she never used, documented every asset with timestamps, titles, and statements, created backup logs and stored them in a private cloud. I didn't hide money. I didn't make shady moves. I just made everything transparent to myself and very, very clear on paper. Then I waited. Not long after, she sat me down. She said she wasn't happy, that she'd been thinking about our future, that she needed time and space and clarity and all the other gentle-sounding phrases people use when they're about to do something harsh. I listened, nodded, asked her what she needed from me. She said she didn't know, that she might stay with her sister for a while. I told her I supported her decision. The next morning, she was gone. I poured myself coffee, logged into my accounts, and prepared for what was coming next. She was gone for 3 days before I got the official notice. A thick envelope arrived, delivered by a third-party courier instead of the post office. No return address, no handwritten note, just printed pages, crisp and impersonal. It wasn't a surprise. I had already checked the court dockets. I knew her name had been filed as the plaintiff the day before. She was quick, I'll give her that, but not quicker than me. The filing was straightforward. Irreconcilable differences, no allegations of abuse or wrongdoing. Standard language requesting an equitable split of assets. But when I flipped to the section outlining her proposed division, I felt something settle in me, something cold and final. She listed our home, the joint bank account, and most importantly, my investment portfolio. Not our, not shared. Mine. The portfolio I built before we ever met. The one I'd grown, managed, and funded entirely on my own. She also included a request for spousal support. She wasn't just leaving. She was planning to take a piece of everything I'd built. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. My attorney and I had already discussed the possibility. Now it was real. He filed our response within 48 hours, comprehensive, documented, and bulletproof. Every asset we'd protected was clearly defined and supported with pre-marriage ownership documentation. The trust I created weeks earlier? Untouchable. The accounts in my name only? Isolated. The investments that were clearly traceable to dates before our wedding? Exempt. We didn't challenge the divorce. I didn't want to stay married to someone who thought she could cash out after pulling the plug. But we challenged the division, and that's where things started to shift. Her attorney sent a follow-up, confused. They weren't expecting resistance, especially not with documentation this organized. Her strategy clearly had assumed that I'd scramble, that I'd be blindsided, that I'd be too emotional to respond logically. They had no idea how long I'd been preparing. The next 2 weeks were a slow unraveling. She texted me twice, once to say she hoped we could stay civil, and once to ask if I'd seen her favorite necklace, the one she might have left in the nightstand. I ignored both. She called once late at night. I didn't pick up. Everything we needed to say would now go through attorneys. When the settlement conference date was scheduled, she requested it be done remotely, claimed she didn't feel comfortable seeing me in person. Her lawyer blamed emotional tension, but I knew the truth. She thought I'd react. She thought I'd lash out or try to guilt her or beg for understanding. Instead, I showed up on that Zoom call in a suit, seated in a neutral space, with a full folder of documentation in front of me and my attorney beside me. I didn't speak unless addressed. I didn't flinch when her side presented their case. I didn't blink when she tried to look directly into the camera like she was waiting for me to break. I let my attorney do the talking. We presented everything: bank statements, transfer logs, title deeds, prenuptial asset reports, date-stamped digital backups, tax filings, every asset she thought she had access to, categorized, protected, and already reviewed by a financial mediator. She went quiet after that. Her lawyer asked for a recess. When we returned, they said they'd need time to revisit certain assumptions. That was the first crack in her plan. After the settlement conference, things went quiet for a while. Not long, just long enough for her to realize the plan she drafted wasn't going to survive contact with reality. Her attorney had clearly underestimated the situation. They went in expecting a one-sided negotiation, and what they found was a fortified position built on documentation, strategy, and timing. 2 weeks after the conference, I got a message, not from her attorney, but from her. A casual email sent at 2:03 a.m. Subject: just wondering if we can talk. No greeting, no signature, just a subject line and a blank message body. I didn't respond. The next day, she texted, "I know things are tense, but I feel like we never really talked. I think we rushed into this." The tone had shifted. No more formality, no more strategy, just loose threads disguised as outreach. She wanted to reel me back in, not because she missed me, but because the story she thought she was writing had taken a turn she didn't anticipate. I waited 3 days before replying. "There's nothing left to talk about. You made your decision." I accepted it. She didn't respond, but she didn't disappear either. A few days later, a friend of mine, one we'd both known during the marriage, sent me a screenshot of something she'd posted on Instagram. A black and white selfie, captioned, "Some people never appreciate what they have until it's gone, but sometimes they never deserved it to begin with." I didn't comment, didn't like it, didn't even open the post myself. She wasn't trying to reach out to me. She was trying to reach an audience that would validate her version of events. The one where she was the misunderstood spouse. The one where she tried her best and was met with coldness. But it wasn't landing, not the way she wanted, because while I stayed silent, I wasn't isolated. Our mutuals saw what was happening, and the ones who knew me, really knew me, weren't buying the performance. Then the real backpedaling began. Her attorney reached out with a new offer. They wanted to restructure the settlement, suggested we try mediation again, pitched the idea of dividing the home but leaving investment assets alone. They phrased it like a compromise, like they were doing me a favor by letting me keep what was mine to begin with. My attorney shut it down in one sentence: no renegotiation. The client has no obligation to yield assets clearly defined as separate property. I never saw the full email her attorney responded with, but I was told the tone changed. Apparently, they realized we weren't bluffing. That this wasn't a case of an emotionally reactive husband scrambling to catch up. That we'd been ahead of him from day one. That's when she switched tactics entirely. She stopped emailing, stopped texting, no more social media jabs. Instead, she showed up. Literally, I came home one evening to find her car parked across the street from my condo. She wasn't in it, just the vehicle, idle, headlights off. I waited inside, didn't open the blinds. She eventually drove off. The next morning, there was a handwritten note slid under my door. Not sealed, just folded. I didn't mean for it to go like this. I still believe in what we had. I think we can fix it. We were good together once. Please don't throw it all away. I read it once, then put it in a drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, because I wanted to remember how calculated people try to rewrite history when they realize they've lost control of the narrative. The thing was, we had been good together once, but that version of us didn't exist anymore. And it hadn't been murdered in cold blood. It had been dismantled piece by piece. Every decision she made to conceal her intentions. Every step she took away from the relationship without saying it out loud. Every quiet move that signaled her exit before the paperwork even showed up. She hadn't been leaving a relationship. She'd been building a case. A financial one. One that assumed I wasn't paying attention. That I wouldn't notice until it was too late. That she could slide out the door and take a piece of everything I'd built without so much as a ripple. She was wrong, and now she was realizing it too late. She requested a meeting. Not legal. Personal. Said she wanted to talk face to face, just once, to clear the air. She said she wanted closure. I didn't offer that, but I agreed. We met in a public park. Middle of the day. Neutral territory. No drama. She looked smaller. Not physically, but smaller. Like someone whose confidence had deflated. She didn't smile. She sat down and immediately started talking. Said she didn't know what she was doing when she filed. Said she felt disconnected, scared. Said she wanted more out of life and didn't know how to ask for it. Said she didn't want to hurt me. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she was done, I asked her one question. Why didn't you come to me first? She blinked. I clarified. Before you filed, before you pulled your financials, before you started planning your exit, why didn't you come to me? She didn't have an answer. Just silence. That's when I knew this wasn't about fear. It was about control. She wanted to control the exit, control the terms, control the image. And when she lost control, she wanted to reframe it as regret. I stood up, thanked her for her time, walked away, and never saw her again. The divorce finalized 4 months after that last meeting in the park. There were no court battles, no dramatic cross-examinations, no depositions with raised voices. Her lawyer sent a final email confirming that she was withdrawing her objections to the proposed division. All joint property was dissolved with clean paperwork. No contest. The trust remained sealed. The investments untouched. The house we once shared was already under my name alone. She signed off on it without a fight. In the end, she walked away with less than she expected, but more than she deserved, because I didn't destroy her. I didn't retaliate. I didn't hire investigators or dig into her financials. I didn't expose her behavior or chase her through social media to correct the narrative. I let her tell whatever version of the story she needed to cope with. But I protected myself legally, financially, and emotionally. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And that's exactly what I got. The moment the court stamped the final decree, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No bitterness. Just stillness. As if the air had finally settled after years of quiet turbulence I didn't have words for until now. She tried to message me again after that. Once, a month after the divorce was finalized, she sent a simple text. I hope you're doing okay. No emojis, no punctuation, just that line. Casual enough to seem kind, but deliberate enough to test the door. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say, because closure doesn't come from a conversation. It doesn't come from last-minute confessions or staged apologies or well-phrased texts meant to sound gentle and reflective. Closure is knowing exactly why something ended, and refusing to walk back into the room where it died. She had closed the door the moment she started planning her exit behind my back. The moment she pulled financial records and framed herself as the victim in a story I didn't even know was being written. The moment she filed, expecting I'd be caught off guard and forced to give up pieces of my life to keep the peace. But I had learned to pay attention, and I had stopped waiting for people to do the right thing before I started protecting myself. Some of our mutual acquaintances still don't know what really happened. I didn't explain it to them. I didn't offer my side. Some of them still follow her, comment on her vague posts, nod along with the "life is messy but we grow" captions. That's fine. Let her curate her piece however she wants. Mine is built on something more concrete. I rebuilt slowly. I moved apartments, invested in better legal coverage, updated every one of my estate documents, and restructured how I think about trust. I don't mean paranoia, I mean clarity. I stopped assuming that long-term love automatically means shared values. I stopped assuming that a shared future means shared goals. And I started treating promises like plans, not guarantees. People ask me if I'm dating again. I tell them I'm taking my time. Not because I'm afraid of getting hurt again, but because the last time I built something with someone who already knew they were planning to walk away from it. And now I'd rather build alone than build blind. She tried to re-add me on social media once. Quietly. No message, no interaction. Just a follow request. I ignored it. Because if someone really wants to reconnect, they start with honesty. They start with ownership. They don't send digital smoke signals hoping to slip back into your life without consequences. My lawyer sent me a final package, paperwork for my records. I filed it unread. I already knew what it said. I already knew how it ended. But I kept a copy of that note she left on my doorstep. The one she wrote after the settlement began to slip out of her hands. The one that said, "I didn't mean for it to go like this." I kept it not because I needed to revisit the pain, but because I needed to remember how it all began. With silence. With quiet decisions made in separate corners of a shared life. With someone preparing for an exit while pretending to stay. That note sits in the back of my filing cabinet, sealed in a plastic sleeve, behind a folder labeled "Preparation." It's not about bitterness. It's about remembering that some people treat you like an option until they realize you weren't theirs to begin with.